So Jim, I think we're good to go.
Let's give it 1 minute. Um, I just turned 11 o'clock, so I'll give it one more minute, make sure everyone is joined.
Yeah, 48 people are on this.
Okay. All right, it's 11:01. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Jim Carroll, and we are here today to announce a joining of two entities for the benefit of consumers and to protect them and for providing a possible solution for public health. A bit of background on me. I am the former director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, informally known as the U.S. Drug Czar, and overseeing the $36 billion that Congress appropriates and the federal government spends on treating people with addiction, helping both prevent addiction as well as the treatment of those, sustaining them in long-term recovery. My history on Kratom goes back really to the beginning of 2018. At that point, the Assistant Secretary for Health at U.S. Department of HHS, Dr. Brett Giroir. Brett was the highest ranking physician at HHS, and a conversation issue came up on Kratom. And he put forth a letter that talks about the possible banning at that point of Kratom. And what he said was he does not recommend Kratom or 7-OH to be banned because there's no science to support that. Sadly, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Brett went on to say there's a significant risk of immediate adverse public health consequences for potentially millions of people if Kratom or its components like 7-OH are banned. My friend, NIDA Director Nora Volkoff, who has served for the last, 4 or 5 presidents, who runs the National Institute for Drug Abuse, she testified more recently in 2022 in response to the drug overdose crisis that we're facing in this country. She quoted, "There's also an interest in the community to test other products that may serve as harm reduction. For example, the use of Kratom that has effects similar to a dose of buprenorphine, which is a safe and effective treatment for opioid use disorder." But she went on to say in her congressional testimony that Kratom could also be used for decreasing withdrawal or depression. So I've been working on this issue for the past several years and working with MAC and the American Kratom Association in the last couple of years. My goal on this is simple. There's millions and millions of people in this country that are suffering from a public health disaster. We're seeing 100,000 people a year dying from illicit drugs. And we have Kratom, which the scientists, and we have some scientists on the call today, and public health officials have said this is a possible solution to that. And of course, there's millions, as I said, people who are suffering from addiction right now. So I've been working on this with MAC and the American Kratom Association for the last several years. And I started talking about this and my concern for people that are suffering and as this possibility for an alternative to opioids. So we started talking about it with my friend and my colleague, Jonathan Miller, who has joined me here today. And what we all realized is that we can be a stronger voice on behalf of these consumers by working together. And so as a result of the conversations, we have today's announcement. These groups have come together for the consumer for responsible product marketplace. And this is really a model for how to responsibly regulate not just Kratom, but any of these holistic products that are on the marketplace. We want a standard of requiring a scientific basis for safety that should apply to all products to, again, protect consumers. So the scientific evidence coupled with appropriate labeling will protect consumers and provide for the continuing public health benefit outlined by Dr. Brett Giroir and Dr. Nora Volkoff. And so with that, I will turn it over to my friend and colleague, Mac Howdow from the American Kratom Association. Mac?
Jim, thank you, and welcome to everyone that's joining us on this media event here. What we're celebrating here is a real achievement for consumers in the Kratom community. The agreement that we have signed is not endorsing 7-hydroxymetrogenine as a product. Rather, it endorses the federal framework for regulating all supplements, and that framework should be an available pathway for all supplement products, assuming that the manufacturers meet that standard, which simply says that all other qualifications having been met, that a manufacturer that places a product in the marketplace must have a reasonable basis for safety of their product based on the conditions of use, which speaks to the labeling. What are the serving sizes? What are the recommended serving sizes per day? That kind of labeling is a critical component of informing a consumer about what the products that they're purchasing so that they make that informed choice for their health and well-being. There is a clear distinction between Kratom and its principal alkaloid metrogenine and 7-hydroxymetrogenine. This agreement recognizes as a crucial step in ensuring that consumers are fully informed about what product they're purchasing, that the 7-OH products cannot be labeled, marketed, or sold as Kratom. We welcome that and thank the Heart Foundation for this important step to ensure that consumers are well informed. We know that 7-OH is a compound that is distinct from metrogenine, the primary active ingredient in the Kratom plant, and the 7-OH metabolite occurs post-harvesting in small amounts typically as the leaves degrade and because of heat and drying process. And we know that the 7-OH metabolite does metabolize in the body and is an important factor in the effects that the Kratom plant provides for consumers as they do it, particularly in this area where people are struggling with acute and chronic pain. So we recognize that and recognize that any product that is formulated from an isolated or synthetically derived or enhanced 7-OH needs to meet the standard that was discussed earlier here of having that reasonable basis for safety. We hope that this is the start for a robust discussion about the distinction between Kratom products. The scientists regularly say, and we concur, that not all Kratom products are equal. We also recognize that medical examiners and coroners who take the step to all too frequently claim that a death is associated with Kratom intoxication doesn't differentiate between Kratom, metrogenine, and 7-hydroxymetrogenine, or metrogenine pseudodoxil, or any other of the isolates or synthesized or enhanced super concentrated alkaloids in the Kratom plant. They need to do this because we think an informed public for public policymakers to formulate public policy, which we're attempting to advance here today, is a critical part of what we're doing. The American Kratom Association does not pick winners and losers in the marketplace. We represent consumers. We try to create a safe marketplace. Our record demonstrates that with our GMP program, which has manufacturers of Kratom products voluntarily submit to adhere to the GMP standards that the FDA sets for supplements, that these manufacturers agree to label their products properly. They do so voluntarily to inform consumers about the products that they're actually purchasing. We do not advocate for one product over another, as some trade associations do. We don't try to gain a market advantage for any of those vendors in the marketplace. Any product that enters the marketplace must meet the standard that I've outlined, and that's what we're hoping for. Labeling is the cornerstone of consumer safety if it's accurate. By requiring today that 7-OH products are clearly differentiated from Kratom products, the agreement provides an important layer of protection for consumers, and we welcome the Heart Foundation's agreement to join us in that effort to protect consumers. So Jim, thank you. I'll turn it back to you and stand by for questions when we're completed with the presentations.
Thank you, Mac. I am now pleased to introduce my friend and colleague here at Frost Brown Todd on behalf of Heart, Jonathan Miller. Jonathan.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks to all of you who are participating, and a big thanks to Mac Hadow for putting this all together. Jim and I have had so many conversations about what is this country's leading public health challenge, and that's the opioid crisis. There's more than 300 drug overdoses and poisonings every day. It's the number one cause of death for 18 to 45-year-olds. And Americans cite this as one of their greatest national concerns. Research confirms that if we're going to reverse this troubling trend, much work needs to be done. To address this crisis, we need to have every tool in the toolkit. We need to be able to offer alternatives that not only will help people avoid opioid use, but also could potentially help them wean them off of opioid abuse. 7-OH, which we've been talking about, has demonstrated in recent years that it can serve as a natural alternative for harm reduction, and its safety profile and effective pain relief potential make it a promising alternative here. We are looking for every way we can to address this terrible crisis. Most importantly, and Patrick Kampmeyer, who'll be speaking in a little bit, can talk about the initial research into this, and the research is new. This is a new product. Initial research indicates no abuse potential, adverse effects, and it is very, very clear that this is not a product that needs to be banned. However, we feel very strongly that these products need to be robustly regulated. Right now, there are products that are being sold as 7-OH, there are 7-OH products being sold as Kratom, some that are being mislabeled, some that are being targeted to minors. These are all horrify the folks in the industry who've come together to create the Holistic Alternative Recovery Trust, or HART. We believe that there must be robust regulation at the state and ultimately at the federal level, and are excited to be working closely with the American Kratom Association to develop new statutory language and regulations where necessary to ensure that products that are 7-OH are not marketed as Kratom, and that they are subject to good manufacturing practices, truth in labeling, and kept out of the hands of minors. These are all very important to our legitimate industry, and we're one of the very few industries out there that are demanding policymakers to please regulate us, because we understand that only through a regulated marketplace can these products ultimately thrive. I'm going to stop there, and we'll be taking questions later, but I'll turn the floor over back to Jim.
Thanks, Jonathan. It is unusual in this day and age to be asking for regulation, but that's what these two groups are doing to make sure that it is a safe marketplace for everyone. As indicated, we're grateful to have two scientists with us today who can both answer questions, but also give some of the scientific history. And so maybe I'll turn it over first to Jack Henningfield. Jack and I have known each other for many years, working together on this. And so, Jack, I'll let you say hi first.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Jack Henningfield. I'm Vice President of Research and Health Policy at Pinney Associates, and I'm Adjunct Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, part-time. By way of disclosure and experience, I've been working on drug safety, pharmacology, addiction, developing treatments for addiction for 50 years, and for about 40 years of that time, working with FDA and DEA on regulation. Regulation is the cornerstone of public safety because it's the interface between products and how the products are regulated and what consumers learn about the products. As a scientist, I'd love to see scientifically evidence-based public health serving regulation and policy, and this is what this is all about. Where this fits into the research is that we have centuries of experience in Southeast Asia on consumer use or population use of kratom, and decades of research there. In the United States, it's more limited. We have decades of consumer use, but we have an awful lot of research in the United States just in the last 10 to 12, 15 years. A lot of that supported by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, my former scientific home. So I'm proud that NIDA is taking a leading role in kratom research. One of the big challenges was, what is it in kratom that are the reasons for why people use kratom? And the big answer is mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, or 7-OH, was also studied, but not nearly as much. There was an important misconception, quite frankly, until a few years ago, and that was that 7-hydroxy was a major constituent of kratom. Well, in fact, as Mr. Haddow mentioned a few minutes earlier, 7-hydroxy is a substance derived from kratom. It forms naturally in leaves over time through enzymatic action. It forms naturally in the body when you consume kratom. And its effects in the body are thought to contribute to the reasons that people use kratom. But its overall safety profile, its overall effect profile, has not been studied nearly as well as mitragynine alone. And 7-hydroxy does raise greater concerns for scientists such as myself from an addiction and a safety perspective. This isn't because there's a lot of evidence showing that it's demonstrating its known harmful profile, but it's more the absence, and we need more research on 7-hydroxy. So it's important to me that we take the approach that is advocated by many scientists and that we have recommended the American Kratom Association, which is that kratom products should not be boosted artificially in 7-hydroxy, and that products that are just pure 7-hydroxy not be sold as kratom products. And I think I'll stop right there. I think this is a good step for, actually, let me just finish, because many states are starting to regulate kratom. And they're adopting, most of them, the idea that I just mentioned, that you state that kratom products should not be artificially boosted, and they should be labeled as to what the levels of different constituents are, and so forth. So this is consistent with what we're advising states. And hopefully soon we will get FDA involved in setting standards for kratom products. And that's something the marketplace and consumers desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Next, we'll turn it over to Patrick. Patrick, please introduce yourself and talk about your experience on the research with us.
Thanks, Jim. I'm Patrick Kampmeyer. I'm the scientific co-founder of Unio Biotech, a biotechnology company based in Kansas. We operate out of the University of Kansas. We develop a variety of central nervous system active drugs, namely for treating depression and anxiety. I'm also a researcher at the Scottsdale Research Institute in Arizona, and we focus on the treatment, we focus on getting certain psychedelic treatments approved for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So I've been tasked with running several of the safety studies, the in vitro toxicity studies and animal studies for some of the minor alkaloids in kratom, 7-hydroxymitragynine being one of them. I'm very excited about 7-hydroxy as a potential treatment for opioid use disorder. I think so far, with these products being available to people, it seems as though they've had a positive impact on people as a whole. But I think it's definitely important that we do our diligence and make sure that we go through the steps in proving that these compounds are safe. We know that 7-hydroxymitragynine is a minor a minor constituent of the kratom plant, but more importantly, it is a major metabolite of mitragynine. There are some studies that estimate that 20 to 30% of mitragynine is metabolized by the body into 7-hydroxymitragynine, and that it is a major mediator of a lot of the analgesic effects that users experience when taking kratom. So clearly, we think this is an important alkaloid and it deserves a lot of attention.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you all for joining. We recognize we do have a lot of participants today, and we really appreciate having so many journalists join us for this. And so I think what would be the easiest thing to do here is if any of the journalists do have questions, could you please put it in the chat and give us your name and your news media organization. Thank you. So we will stand by for the questions.
Jim, I think we're going to also elevate some of the identified journalists to join the panel here where they could interact directly. And that certainly the support people can clarify that.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see any questions on my end. I don't know, Mac, Jonathan, Jack, Patrick, if you can see them on your end, but we'll
Looks
waiting
like
for-
Josh Long has entered the chat room. He's a important journalist in this area. Josh, are you trying to ask a question?
So he is. So Mark, could you elevate him to being a panelist?
Yeah, he's on mute.
We appreciate your patience. We're working
Hello?
with technology here. Josh, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And we, Josh, do you want to go ahead and pose your question, and we'll get the right person to answer it?
Thank you. My question is about the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA has stated that kratom is not appropriate for use as a dietary supplement, and that it's a new dietary ingredient, and it also has determined that kratom, when added to food, is an unsafe food additive. Moreover, regarding 7-OH, it's being marketed as an opioid replacement, and the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act explicitly states that dietary supplements cannot be marketed to treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate a disease. I'd like to have somebody address how you reconcile what the law says, what FDA says. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Josh. And maybe I'll turn this over to Mac first. But Mac, before I turn it over to you, it's hard for me not to jump in, having so much experience with the FDA over the years. Josh, at the beginning of my remarks, I talked about, the statements from Brett Joie, the physician who was the Assistant Secretary for Health, overseeing all of the public health board, HHS. The letter, and I know that's available, and we can make it send it to anyone who wishes to have it, but I know it's on the AKA website and might be on the HART website. He was specifically referring to the FDA's attempt to ban this and putting forth in at least a 3-page letter about some of the misinformation that the FDA had about this. But it's a really good question. And Mac, do you want to go first?
Thank you. First, we recognize that the FDA, the scientists at FDA have a much different view than the policy people at FDA about kratom itself. And that tension is growing, given that, as many of you know, the FDA just completed what is known as a dose finding study. And while some try to minimize this, the critical piece of information about the dose finding study is that it directly contradicted the FDA's prior position that kratom is dangerous for human consumption. That dose finding study showed that at 12 grams, which is an enormous amount of kratom, in a 5-minute period produced no serious adverse events. And they tested up to that 12 grams watching human participants, and it proved the safety of kratom can be consumed to humans at an extraordinary level, all within a 5-minute period. And the only thing they showed was nausea, which is considered to be a minor event. And the nausea was experienced in the placebo group too, because anyone consuming that volume of plant material in a 5-minute period is likely to experience that. More importantly, the FDA was called to account for their position, which has been repeatedly stated in public documents at the federal level, including the Federal Register notice in Factor 6 of the 8 factors, where the FDA promoted the position that kratom poses a public health hazard to the American people. They were called to a federal courtroom in San Diego by the U.S. District Court Judge Robinson to demonstrate their position through evidence and expert witnesses that kratom is dangerous. They refused to participate in that hearing, and the FDA's explanation through the U.S. Attorney was that they, the FDA, have not yet come to a determination that kratom is dangerous. So I recognize that the FDA has the right to say, we don't think that kratom should be marketed as a dietary supplement, a dietary ingredient, or an addition to a conventional food. But the federal judge recognized that kratom is legally sold in 44 states across this country. And but for some local jurisdictions and states that followed the FDA's direction in 2016, 6 of whom did it, many of those are unwinding that now, based on that embarrassingly poor evidence and data that the FDA presented in 2016 and that the FDA continues to promote today. We do not believe that any manufacturer of a kratom product, and I would add 7-OH products, has the right to label their product with any therapeutic claim. And we agree with the FDA on that. We wish the FDA would do what they walk the talk, and that is we filed over 100 complaints to the FDA over the last 3 years of kratom manufacturers who have inappropriately and illegally used therapeutic claims, misleading the American public into buying those kratom products, and not a single prosecution by the FDA. The FDA is not serious about this. All they want to do is build a case where they can again promote for the 4th time an attempt to regulate kratom as ban it as a substance. We think that the internal scientists at the FDA should be listened to, and that is that we properly regulate kratom. That's what we advocate for. But manufacturers cannot make these claims because they're barred by federal law, and we don't think any label should include that, and we report them immediately to the FDA.
Jonathan, anything to add?
Mac did a great job. I should add that, Josh mentioned that if there are products that are being marketed for medicinal effects, then they should not be marketed as dietary supplements. So as we get through, part of this regulation will be to ensure that legitimate, good manufacturing practices and labeling requirements. All of this will include requirements that folks not label products and market products as treating opioid abuse.
Just add real quick, and Jack, I'll get right to you. Jack, I'll turn you because you've traveled the globe for this issue. This also came up internationally and was asked to be examined by almost a dozen countries who voted unanimously not to move forward with a ban of this. But Jack, please go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to address really the conundrum that Mr. Long mentioned, because if you look at the statement that kratom is not appropriate as a dietary ingredient, you might think they're actually trying to ban it presently. But what I urge people to do is go to FDA's website, and they have a section on kratom. They've changed their death warning, if you will, from a number count that they used to have to just saying what NIDA says, which is that deaths are rare and generally involve other substances. But they also have a section discussing what FDA is doing to protect consumers and ensure kratom safety. And if you just look at that, you can see what they're doing and what they're not doing. What they're doing includes, they say they're monitoring the Kratom market. They send out warning letters when they find bad actors and things that they should manage. They are not banning Kratom. And that's an important distinction, because people think when they hear that wording, they think, well, then you can't market it, you can't sell it. FDA isn't getting in the way of that directly, but what they're not doing that I think is important is to begin to set standards for products. And that's something that, in my opinion, FDA is the best organization in the world to regulate consumer products that are consumed, foods and drugs. And we need them to get in the game and start setting standards for products.
Thank you, Jack. The tech folks have asked me to say that we are, fielding questions from the press, and they should ask questions in the Q&A section. The chat function has been disabled intentionally. The Q&A needs to come be the source of the questions from the press, and so asking all the press to do it through the Q&A.
So Jim, I just got a question. I don't know why they're not coming through the chat, from a reporter that says, how do you address the question about that's been raised within the industry about the AKA and heart normalizing 7-OH products, and what's your position on that? So I'd be glad to answer that first and let Jonathan handle that. We're aware that there are some in the Kratom industry who are concerned about the, quote, normalization of 7-OH. Our position is clear on this from the American Kratom Association. We believe that every manufacturer, bar none, is required to meet the standard that we described earlier, that there has to be a good faith basis on the safety based on the labeling or the conditions of use. That is a pathway that's available to every manufacturer of a dietary supplement in the United States today. That applies to Kratom products, Kratom containing products like 7-OH, which now are, by our agreement, is going to be not labeled as Kratom. It also applies to Kratom mixtures like CBD and Kratom, and caffeine and Kratom, and kava and Kratom. Every manufacturer has that responsibility, and we at the American Kratom Association, as I mentioned earlier, will not engage in winners and losers, excluding products from the marketplace who meet the standard. And it is disingenuous, and I would argue hypocritical, for any company in this industry to claim, I can be on the market if I have a product that is a mixture of Kratom with something else, but I'm not going to let a 7-OH product because I don't like the competition. The consumers have a right to make informed decisions about the products that they want to purchase for their health and well-being, assuming they have met the standard that's been articulated in this agreement and that is the prevailing federal standard. And any of these companies that want to exclude other products simply for competitive advantage needs to go back to the drawing board and figure out how they are going to market their products in a competitive marketplace, protecting the safety of the American consumer.
Jonathan, anything to add?
No, Mac did it eloquently. I think it's important to understand that what some might call normalization is truly a robust regulation. It's taking these products that have tremendous potential benefits and making sure they are delivered to consumers and adults only in a safe and appropriate matter. And if that is the charge, then I fully embrace it.
Great.
So, and I just add, Jim, Jonathan made a great point. And I think it goes back to Josh's question earlier, and that is, if there is a manufacturer who is marketing their product with a specific therapeutic claim, they should be removed from the marketplace. There is no room in this marketplace for a dietary supplement to be making a drug-related therapeutic claim as a basis for a consumer to be misled into buying that product. It's unequivocal from our standpoint. We believe, and that's why we reported over 100 products in the Kratom space to the FDA to try to eliminate that, because consumers have a right to make informed decisions. They should not be misled by any therapeutic claim, and any manufacturer that makes those claims should be removed from the marketplace.
Thank you. Let's go back and make sure that if you're a member of the press and want to ask a question, please do it through the Q&A and give your name and your organization. Mac, while we're waiting for the next journalist, Josh, if you're still there, Josh, you have a question posed directly to Mac. Mac, can you educate us on the 708 limitations in the Kratom Consumer Protection Acts in the state legislatures across the country?
I can, thank you. The original concept behind the Kratom Consumer Protection Act limitation on 708 content was designed to make certain that there was no artificial synthesizing of the 708 metabolite in the kratom plant. And so we established that level at no greater than 1% of the overall fraction of the total alkaloid composition of the plant. We thought about and actually accepted for a brief period of time a 1% level. I think today the scientists have agreed with us that 2% is an appropriate level, which is why this agreement is important. Because if you want to manufacture a 708 product, which is outside of the parameters established in the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, you have to stand on your own. And that's why it's critically important that this agreement applies to any manufacturer of a 708 product that does not meet that standard, cannot label their product as Kratom. And any that continue to do so, and they have an elevated 708 level, they should be banned from the marketplace by the state in which that law applies, and any future ones. We're going to work with the Heart Group in order to develop specific legislative language around 708 products, because I think they share the view, and Jonathan can answer this himself, they share the view that there should not be artificially escalated levels of 708 that are not supported by the labeling requirement, which is the critical factor in the federal law, which says that the product has to be safe under the conditions of use. So if there's not sufficient safety information that would document the 708 level being safe, then that product should be eliminated from the marketplace as well. And we will support that legislative language going forward.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Josh, for the follow-up question. Again, please, if you're a journalist, please put your question in the Q&A. And I don't see any other questions from journalists in the Q&A. I don't know, just to make sure, Mac, Jonathan, that we're all seeing the same, that there's no other news organizations with questions.
Yeah, if I could just supplement what I said to Josh's question. There was a very interesting survey done by Dr. McCurdy at the University of Florida of about 350 commercially available kratom products in the United States, which found that none of those products, and I thought this was great news for consumers, none of those products exceeded a 708 level that was above the detectable level at 0.3%. And I think that affirms that there is the self-regulation model in the kratom marketplace is working. Now, this did not address 708 specific products, which this agreement changes the regulatory landscape for, because we don't, and the Heart Group does not support any 708 product calling itself kratom. We need to look closely at the levels of 708 based on the scientific data demonstrating the safety for the recommended serving size and the labeling instructions on those. That's the important distinction. And again, I get it that there are some in the kratom industry that don't like 708 products. There's some in the kratom industry that don't like kava kratom combination products. And my response is consistent. If they meet the standard, if they have the scientific evidence to demonstrate that under the conditions of use, the labeling, they are legal products. and they should be allowed on the marketplace, but they have to be responsible for that. We're talking about requiring manufacturers to make sworn statements as they register in the states that they have that basis for safety. They can't come in later and say, oh, now that I have to have it, I have to go find it. That doesn't work. And that's a big concern right now. Many people know that the state of Utah delisted kava kratom products from the allowable products sold in the marketplace. That requires that particular company or those group of companies, I think there were 7 or 8 products that were removed, maybe more, to come and demonstrate the safety for those products. That doesn't mean that you assemble it now. It means you have to have had it before you got onto the marketplace. And it's an immediate thing. Just proffer the evidence. And once done, then that product, I think, will be cleared for the marketplace. And that's the important standard that we want to advocate for.
And I think we have one last question. Patrick, it's for you specifically. Patrick, can you please elaborate on the safety studies being done regarding 7-OH?
I was muted there. Yeah, so we're beginning a Beagle study right now with 7-OH products and with pseudoindoxyl products. Prior to actually embarking on that study, we're going to complete some of the hepatotoxicity assays, cellular-based toxicity assays, which we've actually already completed several of the cell-based assays and established cytotoxic levels for 7-OH. And so far, the data shows that it's very safe. We haven't the range at which 7-OH becomes cytotoxic is far above like therapeutic window or the recommended dose for 7-OH.
Right. Thank you,
Well,
Patrick.
Jim, could I one last comment if I could make it, and then I'll be quiet. The American Kratom Association is allowed under the law to make therapeutic claims, to describe the experience of consumers, because we don't manufacture or sell any kratom products. I think that benefit also extends to the Heart Group. They can, on their website, as we do on ours, describe consumer experiences. The law is specific to manufacturers, that they cannot make therapeutic claims specifically for their products. And if they do, they're subject to the enforcement actions appropriately enforced by the Food and Drug Administration, if they would do it, and we hope they will, step up that enforcement, to remove those products from the marketplace, because that misleads consumers. But the fact that we at the American Kratom Association or the Heart Organization talk about those consumer experiences is not violating the law, and that we're allowed to do it, and we will continue to advocate for consumers expressing their viewpoints.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mac. You made a very important point. Thanks for broaching that.
Well, thank you all very much. It's been fun to be the moderator of this and see the organizations come together on behalf of consumers and helping people to make sure that they understand the products that are out there, that they're properly and safely labeled, that they are marketed in an appropriate way. Quite frankly, also as the father of a child who is in recovery from a dependence on opioids, I fully support the research, fully support what the scientists here are doing to make sure that it is safe, but also hopefully one day we can get away from prescription opioids and the like. So with that, thank you all very much. Please, if you're a member of the press, please do reach out to Mac or to Jonathan if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks.